Imagine a life so burdened by legacy that the only escape is to vanish. Consider a name so monumental its shadow could eclipse an entire existence. This is the untold story of a son who chose to dismantle the most formidable military dynasty in American memory. General Douglas MacArthur envisioned his son, Arthur IV, as the third family member to earn the Medal of Honor, projecting a military career stretching into the year 2000. Political strategists in Washington saw Arthur IV as the ideal presidential candidate for 1972, a marketing dream. Newspapers across America declared the MacArthur name too ingrained in the national consciousness to ever fade from public view. Every single one of these predictions proved utterly false. Within 5 years of his father's passing, the general's only son had disappeared into New York City, adopting a new identity and refusing to ever utter his birth name again. Douglas MacArthur was more than a military leader. He was a force of nature. He was a man convinced of his own royal destiny, born to command. He left behind a wife who reigned like a queen in a luxury hotel suite for 3 decades, and a son who perceived the MacArthur name not as a birthright, but as a life sentence. General Douglas MacArthur passed away at Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C. on April 5, 1964, at the age of 84, succumbing to liver and kidney failure. He had survived the trenches of World War I, the vast theaters of World War II, and the brutal conflict in Korea, even enduring a public dismissal by the sitting President of the United States. His funeral became a national spectacle. President Lyndon B. Johnson himself attended the solemn ceremony. Full military honors were observed, and the event garnered extensive global media coverage. The man who had governed Japan as supreme commander, who had famously waded ashore at Leyte, whose addresses to Congress had become legendary orations, was now gone. He left behind his second wife, Jean MacArthur, and his sole son, Arthur MacArthur IV, then 26 years old. But while historical accounts focus on the old warrior's final fade, they often overlook the son who executed a precise strike on his own identity, and the secret arrangement that allowed the MacArthur widow to live in opulence while her child became a phantom. The MacArthur lineage was meant to endure forever. Arthur MacArthur I served with distinction during the Civil War. Arthur MacArthur II earned the Medal of Honor in the Philippines, rising to become the Army's highest-ranking officer. Douglas MacArthur achieved the rank of 5-star general, solidifying his place as one of America's most celebrated military figures. Arthur MacArthur IV was expected to complete this grand legacy with a distinguished military career and a foray into politics, extending 3 generations of martial glory. Douglas MacArthur fully anticipated this, meticulously planned for it, and shaped his final years around the certainty that his son would carry the family name forward. Arthur IV, however, harbored entirely different intentions. He was born in Manila in 1938. His early childhood unfolded in the Philippines, where his father commanded United States forces. He was evacuated to Australia during the Japanese invasion, spending the war years watching his father become a global icon while rarely seeing him in person. Douglas MacArthur was present for the cameras, the triumphant return to the Philippines, the occupation of Japan, and carefully staged public displays of fatherhood that resonated in newsreels. Yet the private relationship painted a starkly different picture. Arthur IV grew up with a father who functioned more as a national symbol than a nurturing parent, an icon rather than a family man. The immense weight of the MacArthur name settled upon him long before he could even walk. His path was predetermined before he had any say. The wall of expectation was absolute. Douglas MacArthur publicly informed reporters that his son would attend West Point, serve in the military, and uphold the family tradition. There was no room for discussion, no consideration of alternative life paths. The dynasty demanded its continuation. Arthur IV's personal preferences held no significance against the historical gravity of 3 generations of MacArthur military service. But Arthur IV never enrolled at West Point. Instead, he pursued studies in music at Columbia University, mastering the piano. This choice represented a quiet act of defiance, neither dramatic nor public, simply a son selecting a different route than the one his father had meticulously charted before his birth. Following the general's death, Gene MacArthur moved into Suite 35A, the presidential suite at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York. The hotel's proprietors offered it rent-free as a permanent tribute to Douglas MacArthur's legacy, a residence for the widow of the American Caesar. Jean accepted this offer, and she would reside there for the subsequent 35 years. The suite transformed into her personal domain, where she presided over a constant stream of diplomats, military officers, and historians. She attended numerous ceremonies honoring her late husband and diligently managed his public image. She granted carefully prepared interviews that never contained criticism, revealed secrets, or deviated from the meticulously crafted image of the great man. She became the unwavering keeper of the flame, the steadfast guardian of the MacArthur myth. She performed this role flawlessly until her death in the year 2000, at the remarkable age of 101. But her son had already vanished. Arthur MacArthur IV officially changed his name sometime during the late 1960s. The precise date remains outside public record, but his new identity was reportedly David Mack. The name was close enough to be legally defended as a shortened version, yet sufficiently distinct to sever the powerful association. He relocated to a modest apartment in Greenwich Village, working as a concert pianist and performing in intimate venues. He lived a secluded life, actively avoiding public attention and refusing all contact with his father's biographers, historians, and legacy organizations. The MacArthur Memorial in Norfolk, Virginia, was established to honor Douglas MacArthur. Arthur IV declined to attend its dedication. He refused any involvement, choosing to ignore the memorial's very existence. The name change transcended mere legal paperwork. It represented a complete overhaul of his identity. Arthur IV understood that bearing the MacArthur name meant living as public property. Every action faced intense scrutiny. Every decision was weighed against the achievements of his father and grandfather. Every relationship was evaluated for its potential political or social implications. The only path to a private existence was to cease being a MacArthur. And so, he did. He severed the connection and forged a new identity. The son of America's most renowned general became an unrecognized pianist in New York City. His anonymity was intentional, absolute, and ultimately successful. The piano offered his escape route. Music provided a world entirely distinct from the military legacy. Concert performance demanded skill, rigorous practice, and unwavering dedication. It was a meritocracy where success was measured by talent, not by lineage. Arthur IV, now known as David Mack, built a career based on his own abilities rather than his father's historical stature. The venues were small, the audiences modest, the income sufficient, and the life private. These were all things the MacArthur name would never have permitted. He had exchanged a dynasty for obscurity, fame for personal freedom, and a grand inheritance for true independence. His choice was definitive and irreversible. Jean MacArthur understood her son's actions but never publicly acknowledged them. She continued her life in the Waldorf suite, managing the general's legacy and maintaining the public persona of the MacArthur widow. Yet privately, she knew the dynasty had reached its conclusion. Her son had chosen a profoundly different life. The MacArthur name, in its dynastic sense, would perish with her. There would be no fourth generation of military service, no continuation of the family tradition. The three-generation dynasty which Douglas MacArthur had presumed permanent was ending in a Greenwich Village apartment where a concert pianist named David Mack never spoke of his father. His refusal to attend the funeral served as his ultimate declaration. When Jean MacArthur passed away in the year 2000, Speculation arose that Arthur might attend. She was his mother, the last tangible link to his childhood, the final person who knew him as Arthur MacArthur IV. He remained absent. The funeral was a state affair, complete with military honors, dignitaries, and extensive press coverage. Douglas MacArthur's widow was laid to rest beside the general at the MacArthur Memorial in Norfolk. Arthur IV stayed in New York, maintaining his separation. He refused to participate even in his mother's final ceremony. The message was unmistakable. He was not a MacArthur, not publicly, not socially, not in any way that mattered to the legacy his father had constructed. Imagine the widow Jean, seated in the Waldorf dining room, acknowledging diplomats who still treated her like royalty, yet knowing her only child had not called in months. Picture the son, David, on a Central Park bench, observing tourists purchase postcards bearing his father's image, acutely aware that speaking his real name would shatter his quiet life in moments. Biographers lingered at the apartment door, pens poised, but the man inside simply played his piano until they eventually departed. A dynasty that once commanded the Pacific concluded in a one-bedroom apartment with its curtains drawn. The emotional toll of being MacArthur's son was the sheer impossibility of genuine detachment. The name was too immense, the expectations too absolute. The only viable solution was complete erasure. The contrast with other prominent military families was striking. George Patton IV joined the Army, fought in Korea and Vietnam, and achieved the rank of Major General. He spent his career navigating his father's legacy while striving to forge his own path. Dwight Eisenhower's son, John, pursued a career as an Army officer and became a respected military historian. Robert E. Lee III served in the Army throughout World War I. Military dynasties typically persisted. Sons consistently followed their fathers into service, ensuring the tradition endured across generations. Arthur MacArthur IV shattered this pattern entirely. He did not merely abandon the military, he abandoned the very identity. He changed his name and meticulously constructed a completely separate life. His rejection was absolute. Douglas MacArthur's aspirations for his son were explicitly stated. He delivered speeches about Arthur IV, upholding the family tradition, and made public pronouncements regarding his son's future military career. These expectations were widely reported in newspapers and analyzed by political commentators. The pressure exerted was neither subtle nor private. It was public and unrelenting. Arthur IV grew up knowing the world expected him to become the fourth MacArthur general. The immense burden of 3 generations of military service was placed upon him before he could even consent. His response was to completely walk away from it all. The Waldorf suite became a powerful symbol of this profound division. Jean MacArthur lived in rent-free luxury in the presidential suite, a permanent homage to her husband's enduring legacy. She had chosen to embody the widow of Douglas MacArthur, to manage his legacy, and to perform that demanding role, residing in the suite until her 101st year. She dedicated 35 years within that hotel suite to meticulously maintaining the image of the great man. Her son, meanwhile, resided in a small Greenwich Village apartment under a different name. The physical distance between the Waldorf and Greenwich Village measured only a few miles. The social distance, however, was infinite. Mother and son inhabited the same city with utterly divergent relationships to the MacArthur name. The estate Arthur inherited was substantial, but he reportedly did not utilize it in ways the general would have approved. Douglas MacArthur bequeathed money, property, and personal effects, the kind of inheritance designed to support a political career or a military legacy. Arthur IV employed it to sustain a quiet existence as a musician. No political campaigns, no military service, no public engagement with the MacArthur legacy. The funds intended to perpetuate the dynasty instead financed its dismantling. The inheritance became the means of escape rather than the foundation for continuation. So, What became of Douglas MacArthur's immediate family after his passing? Jean MacArthur embraced the role of the general's enduring widow. She lived in the Waldorf presidential suite for 35 years. She managed his legacy, attended ceremonies, gave sanctioned interviews, and preserved his public image until her death in 2000. Arthur MacArthur IV changed his name, became a concert pianist, and for over 5 decades refused all contact with his father's legacy. He did not attend memorial dedications. He did not speak to biographers. He did not participate in public events honoring his father. He chose absolute separation. The dynasty many assumed would be permanent concluded within a single generation. The son, once expected to be the third MacArthur to win the Medal of Honor, became a pianist largely unknown to the public. The destiny of Douglas MacArthur's family was a complete subversion of all expectations. The general, who believed himself destined for historical permanence, left a widow who professionally performed that permanence, and a son who utterly rejected it. Jean MacArthur meticulously preserved the hallowed memory. Arthur MacArthur IV destroyed the dynasty through the simple, powerful act of choosing a different life. The MacArthur name, which had dominated American military history for 3 generations, effectively ended with Jean in the year 2000. Her son outlived her, but he was no longer a MacArthur. He was David Mack, a concert pianist in New York. He demonstrated that even the most formidable legacy can crumble when its designated heir simply decides to walk away. The general had predicted his son would remember him from the warmth of home, not the brutality of battle. His son remembered him from neither. He chose to forget, and in that act of forgetting, he liberated himself from a legacy that would have consumed his entire existence. The MacArthur dynasty concluded not with a dramatic collapse, but with a quiet, unyielding refusal. One son, one new name, one enduring silence. This was the ultimate act of self-liberation in American history.